Good evening, Edgemont community. My name is Teresa Kaufman. I'm part of the PTSA board, and tonight we have a speaker named Amy Badini. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
Who's going to be speaking to us regarding substance abuse. Ms. Badini is a mentor to adolescents in staying safe and drug and alcohol free, Ms. Badini holds an MA in developmental psychology from Fordham University, where she specialized in adolescent development, and a BA in psychology from the University of Vermont. If you have any questions while you are watching, you're welcome to still fill out the Google form. And here we go. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me. Thanks for inviting me to your Zoom meeting. Hopefully in the future, we'll have more of these in person. I'm not sure, many of you may know or may not know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And this week happens to be National Prevention Week. So the timing of this talk is really perfect. And National Prevention Week is run through SAMHSA, which is Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration. It's a federal administration. And one of the documents that you'll find in the Google Docs is from SAMHSA, and they are also on the resource list. While every day is an opportunity to prevent risky behavior, the SAMHSA has declared this National Awareness Week to have an opportunity to show that your efforts really work. They believe that that your kids actually do hear you. And my mantra is early and often, and that's what that document is. Talk to kids about alcohol and other drugs. So they really do hear you as much as you might think that they don't, they actually do. And you may also not realize that we've surveyed many adolescents over the years. And one of the main reasons that they will tell you that they abstain from the use of alcohol and other drugs is something about their parent. My parent will kill me. My parent will be disappointed in me, something about the parent. So it's really interesting because parents consistently underestimate their influence and they overestimate the influence of their peers. So if you could take one thing away from this, it's the fact that you really do have power and that they really do hear you. So, I titled this, I don't know if it was titled anywhere, working to keep your kids healthy, safe, and strong. So that you have that power to teach your kids lots of different things and to produce really healthy, safe, and strong kids. You know, we immunize our kids, we put them in seatbelts, we tell them to wear bike helmets, we put sunscreen on them to keep them healthy and safe. But when it comes to sort of substance abuse prevention, for some reason, we sort of think, oh, that's a natural part of adolescence. And while some kids do wind up experimenting and taking more risky behaviors, it doesn't have to be a natural part of adolescence. You have the power to have these conversations, just like you would say, you wear your bike helmet, you know, you look both ways before you cross the street. One thing that COVID has done, I know this discussion might be different if it was pre-COVID, but one thing it has done is it has shown us that we need to really focus on health. You know, how you eat and how you sleep and all of those things became important. And it all has to do also in adolescence with brain development. And I don't know how many talks you've had on adolescent development and adolescent brains and all that kind of stuff. But one of the analogies that I like to use is we've put MRI images on kids' brains, and we ask them to calculate math problems. Like, you remember those problems, you know, the trains traveling to St. Louis going this fast and how, you know, and what happens is adolescent brains use more brain power than adults who calculate those same problems. And the reason is because they're trying to develop those pathways. And when you introduce substances into that developing brain, that's where you have a problem. So we know that with every year you can delay onset of substance use, you can prevent lifelong addiction. So a kid who drinks at, say, 14 years old has a 47% chance of lifelong addiction. That's pretty high. At 16, it decreases to 25%. 18 decreases to 17%. And if they wait till they're 21, they almost have a 0% chance of lifelong addiction. That's why it's really, really important to try to prevent, delay. I don't know if I'm like talking too fast, if there's any questions that we can bounce off of.
How would you recommend the delay when they go to middle school and they're 13, 14, how would it be a sort of a community-wide delay? A lot of maybe parents get together, school administrators, how would that?
Yes. So one of the things is like I said, early and often, and you could start conversations with, I was attending this talk last night and I heard XYZ, or I was speaking with a friend and I heard XYZ. So it's all conversational. So one of the things that my kids make fun of me over is I drove them to middle school, and each time another kid got in the car, the other older one would say, "How are those rides going with mom?" Because they knew that those were the opportunities I would take to say, make good choices, watch what you're doing, all of those things. So it doesn't even have to be specifically about substance use. It can be about staying healthy, what you put in your body and how you sleep and those kinds of things. And having those real conversations, saying that we know the data that says with every year you can delay, the better it is for your brain, basically. Another thing that people often say is they need to learn to drink before they go to college. That's my favorite one. So my explanation of that is, do you need to travel to Nepal to learn geography? Or do you need to run for political office to learn about politics? So there are ways to discuss safe drinking, moderate, use. You can teach those things without actually having to engage in those things.
Let me just ask a quick question. Is smoking involved part of this statistic, drugs, alcohol, and is it cigarettes also, or is that a separate?
Yeah. So unfortunately, the tobacco industry got really, really smart. We almost ended cigarette smoking in youth. And that's the tobacco, the like burning cigarettes, right? So we almost finished it. And there was this whole campaign, #finish it. And then they invented these vape pens. And that really was a disservice to our teens and everybody. But yes, it's a substance. The nicotine is the same substance in the brain, not the same substance, but it affects the brain in the same way as other drugs, that they chemically alter the brain. That's what addiction is when, like I said, that the developing brain uses more brain power, lights up more in an MRI, in a CAT scan, lights up more brain power. And so we know that when you introduce those chemicals, whatever it is, nicotine, alcohol, heroin, it's going to physically alter the brain.
May I ask another question?
Yes.
Please.
Yes, please.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Jump in. But what defines addiction? Is it one time a student vapes or drinks or smokes pot or whatever the substance abuse is? Is it one time, 3 times? How does that?
Yeah, well, so that I guess the medical answer to addiction is a dependency. So how quickly can they become dependent?
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of factors that are involved in that. But typically if someone's drinking at 14, they're going to be drinking longer during the development of the brain. So that it's a higher contribution to become addicted physically.
Okay. Interesting.
But one of the scary things, well, I'll just start with the story that I told Andrea when we were talking. It was about Snapchat, right? A lot of parents are hearing about Snapchat. And a famous celebrity's son, 16 years old, thought he had Xanax on Snapchat, and it was laced with fentanyl, and he died. And that's what like started the conversation. And I said to her, we need to talk about all those things, because you can't be around your kid all the time and watching them at every moment. You have to be able to, as a parent, feel like I've given my kid the tools to make good choices. And even my kids are 26, 23, and 20, and we talk about making good choices all the time still, right? That you have to make good choices. And so, technology, right? Like we can never be in front of our kids with technology, but we need to be able to empower them to have honest discussions with them in order for them to be able to navigate their world. And sometimes having those honest discussions means like, yeah, it can be really rough being a teenager, like especially COVID with not going to school. And that was part of the thing with the rise of Snapchat, right? That it was an easily available way to get things if you're down, depressed, and that kind of stuff. And speaking of mental health, that's one of the discussions also you can have with kids is you can be sad. It's okay. Adolescents can be sad, but you should never be to a point where you can't ever feel happy. And if you ever feel that way, you need to be able to either talk to me or talk to another adult or talk to a teacher. And that conversation goes across lots of things. We had suicide I live in Greenwich, and we had a suicide where all of a sudden it hit me. I knew the boy was in my club at the high school. And I called all my kids and I said, never, ever, ever is that a solution to the problem. Whatever the problem is, that's not the solution. And you need to, again, talk to a parent, talk to a teacher, talk to a trusted adult. And those are the conversations that you have. Honest conversations. I know this happens, but never should it get to a point where you feel that's the solution.
Amy, I have to imagine that teenagers often think that their friends get to do things that they can't, and then use that peer pressure to try to convince their parents to be allowed to do the things that don't fit into the family's norms.
Right.
What advice can you give to parents who are facing, kids are getting older, pushing boundaries, limits? How do they approach those difficult conversations?
So there was a PSA commercial years ago that I loved, where one kid goes, well, Jimmy's parents are letting him go. And then Jimmy says, well, Johnny's parents are letting him go. And the parents were talking to each other. And then the kids get on the phone. They're like, yeah, my parent won't let me go either. So one of the things is to know who your kids' friends' parents are. Now, you don't have to be best friends with them, but if you know who they are and you have these conversations, that's one way to say, we know all of that. Another thing to say to your kids is sometimes they need you to be the out. And sometimes parents, again, I started this with that parents consistently underestimate their power. And the number one thing that kids say why they abstain is something about their parent. So sometimes the kid just needs the parent as the out, right? So one thing we talked about is the how to get out of a sticky situation. And it was, I forgot to tell my mom, Aunt Sue called, right? So you get the phone call, I forgot to tell you Aunt Sue called, and the kid on the other end goes, you're saying, all right, where are you? I'll come get you. And the kid on the other end, I know it was important. I'm sorry. They get off the phone and they're like, oh my God, she's so mad. She's coming to get me right now. So they need you sometimes for an out, and even have that conversation. If you ever need that, I will be that parent for you. Were there other questions in the Google Doc?
One of the questions is, how can you help if you know a friend or a friend is using drugs?
So it's a student asked a question, like a student, what do you do?
Well, they're anonymous, but yeah, what would you
Right.
do?
What do you do
if you were a
if
student and your friend was
was
abusing?
So, I mean, the first suggestion I would have for a student is to go to a trusted adult, an advisor. I'm sure at the high school they have social workers, and ask for support that way. I understand wanting to be anonymous, but I think if it went in a bad direction, it would be worse on the student. So I would say that you need to, either go to your own parent. You can keep it anonymous. You don't have to say who the friend is, I suppose, but to work to get the person help, you could, I would use the same brain information and that kind of thing. But if they need help, then you have to have no judgment and get them help, because the sooner you intervene, the more success you have.
I have a question for you, Betsy. Betsy in the corner here has had 5 boys go through the school system. So Betsy, do you feel that in the community of Edgemont that this platform works, or is there part of you that feels like it becomes a social situation, not so much a substance abuse? But if you know the Kaufmans are the party family or the party house, how does that get resolved, or how did your boys navigate that? I guess you would be the out. Were you the out parent?
Well, I have had 5 sons go through Edgemont, and Matt is my senior now, almost through with it, and they've had very different experiences. My oldest son, our house, was a house that I think bad things happened at. I'm not proud of that. And, it was in the little, code in the senior, the yearbook writings, like our back porch was some nefarious things happened there. We learned lessons the hard way. We locked up our liquor too late. Thinking, these kids they're not interested in that, like closing the barn door after the animals get out. And I can relate, Amy, to what you said about, they need to learn to, handle themselves before they go away. Because there are those horror stories about kids that, overdrink in college, not knowing their limit, and bad things happen. And so, rightly or wrongly, I felt like, well, my kids have had some experience with alcohol. Maybe that won't be such a big issue for them. Now, on the younger side here, my youngest son is not interested, and I don't want to be that naive mom thinking, oh, he's never touched alcohol, but he's not that partier, and I am very worried about him going away, and how he'll handle that moment when he's offered alcohol, which is a likely scenario.
And I would say those are the conversations you have, just what you said. That exact, not to say, so I want you to drink at home, but to say, to be aware, to make good choices, and call if you need anything. Right? That was the thing, is to be secure in that you've given them the tools to make those decisions. So that's an honest conversation, and that'll get you really far. One of the websites that I have on the resource list is actually called greenwichtogether.org. And we took a page out of Darianne's book. They have a drug-free grant, national drug-free grant. And it's the purpose of the grant is to assess substance issues in your town, survey the youth as far as use, and then survey parents as far as their knowledge. And then you take that survey data and you apply it to your community. And so if you go on our Greenwich Together website, you'll see tons of resources. And that Snapchat story that I said is one of the first things that pops up. It's actually an overlay. It pops up over it to really get parents aware of the social media thing. But to your point, we actually just had a meeting this morning. And one of the things that was really, really concerning was how acceptable excessive alcohol use is with our teens. And so the discussion revolved around, how do we address that? How do we prevent that? And what we found is that education in middle school, kids kind of listen. And then when you get to high school, they might not be listening as well. And that's when parents have to use their power that they have, that they don't realize they have, to have those discussions. So alcohol toxicity is still kills kids, right? Wasn't there just a recent death in a university from that? There was the Penn State one, that was the famous one. And then there's a recent one. So those are the conversations you have. Look, this happens at college, right? Kids are dying. That would kill me. That would just kill us if I got a phone call like that. And those conversations really, really protect kids more than, sort of accepting it, right? That kid, and then we surveyed the kids and we asked them, what makes you abstain? A lot of it was sort of what you were saying, Betsy, internal. There are kids that are not interested, right? There are some kids that really look at the consequence of athletics, like, I want to be the best athlete I can be. And again, I think that goes back to the whole COVID thing. I think there's going to be this renewed focus on health. But we also know that there's stress and loneliness and isolation, right? So one of the other resources that I didn't make to the list is, if anyone knows that app Headspace, it's an app called Headspace, and the creator's from Australia, so he's fun to listen to. And it's mindfulness and meditation. And so I have a junior in college, and she, I forget which year it was. I think it was her freshman year. She was having some issues, and she would call crying, and I'm like, just put on your Headspace. And she put on the Headspace, and it was all better. And so all my kids use it. It's a great way to reduce stress. And I recommend that to like all high school kids today, because I'm sure in COVID, it's not easy for them.
One thing that concerns me, and I know, you're aware of this as well, is that, there's, kids on college campuses are underage. And
Yep.
it seems like the rules are very lax. I mean, teachers will, the storyline is that they don't allow alcohol, but it's rampant. In fact, they have substance-free dorms. So, as opposed to, not that every dorm is not.
Right.
And I grew up, the drinking age was 18. It was, everyone in college was drinking was legal. It's just, it's very gray, the rules are not black and white. And, that's another reason why I think there's so many issues in college. You go from these hard and fast rules to sort of a laxed enforcement of the law.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting that you said that about the drinking age, because that's always been my theory. So I grew up in Connecticut with the drinking age at 21, and I had my children young. I know I did. And I often think that when the majority of the kids in high school's parents grew up with the drinking age of 21, that we might start to see some change in that. It's just a theory. because for me, it was always illegal. Even in high school, it was illegal. I did go to the University of Vermont. So all of a sudden it became legal. My grade was split in half, actually. Half of us were legal still. And then it went to 21. But I went to a talk once just like this when my kids were younger. And we had an attorney. The talk was on the House Party bill. I guess, I don't know if it's in Connecticut or if it's federal, about that you can be liable if underage is drinking on your property. And the lawyer said, listen, I know what kids do, but never with my permission. My kid's not going to drink with my permission. And in our survey, in our Greenwich survey that I was just sharing with you, the percentage of students that reported with parent permission is one of the things that we'll be focusing on in our prevention work. We're doing social media campaigns. We hired Hearst Media, something as a community you can think of. Through your school system, we hired Hearst Media, and we'll be doing social media ads with information for parents and also for students. We're on Instagram and other sources also you can look at and bring back to your community if you're interested. So again, knowing, and then I had a friend once say to me, well, your kids are just going to think you're stupid because they're going to be drinking behind your back and they're going to think you're stupid. And my response to that was, I'm okay if my kid thinks I'm stupid. I know I'm not stupid, right? So, and I know what kids do. They push limits. So if my limit is 0 and they push a little, I'm comfortable with that versus I say have 1 or 2, and then they push that limit even more. So you use the law, you use everything you can use. And I still think that kids listen to you. They really do listen to you, even though they might shut you out, they might, put the hand up, whatever, but you do have a lot of power. And the resources I gave you from SAMHSA and drugfree.org, if you feel like searching around, there's more information in there on how to support your conversations with kids. And you could even get together as a group, your kids' friends and their parents, and have, you go to dinner or whatever, and then you bring up the conversation. It's amazing how they'll open up and tell you things.
So one of the questions on the list, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. The question is, for teens who already drink and are not open to giving up all drinking, how best to encourage them to at least be responsible about it?
That's a tough one there. Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Sort of feel the cat's out of the bag at that point, but
I know. I personally would use like the brain development stuff. I know. So one of the things I used to say when my kids were younger is that the best talk to get parents out, how can you raise SAT score? Want to raise your kid SAT score? Come to this talk. Because really it's a piece of that, right? First of all, our communities are very sensitive to having high SAT scores and getting into good colleges. It could be the same talk. You want your kids to get in the best college and you'll fill the auditorium. And it's about these issues really, right? Because it does affect their brains. It does. I read an analogy in these resources. You can go and you can read it about building a house, right? So you build a house from the ground up. And in an adolescent brain, it develops from the back front, right? So the front of the brain is that control part, the frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex. That's the control part. Without that control part, they can make some really dumb decisions. But if you introduce substances into that also, that development is even slower. So, I hear the question. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm lucky because I get to work with really civically minded kids who say to their peers, you're the party, not the drugs and alcohol, party sober. So I don't know if you have a SAD chapter in your school or if you have some civically minded kids who are interested. It's called Students Against Destructive Decisions. They have a website also. And they do campaigns around the school to try to promote, kind of that perspective that you're the party. You'll remember it. You won't have a headache, all those other things. So I'm not trying to avoid your question. I just don't know how I would say for a 18-year-old to or 17-year-old to drink responsibly. I know I would have discussions with my kid that as an adult, you drink responsibly, right? One of the things that we show adults is how much is a drink, right? So 6-ounce glass of wine is a drink, right? If you ever go to a restaurant and they pour you a glass of wine, you're like, oh, that's a half a glass of wine. But a drink of alcohol, like one drink is 6 ounces. So, my husband will make a Manhattan or whatever, and it's like this big. And he's like, it's one drink. I'm like, no, that's probably 2.5 drinks, so being aware of what a drink is, that's how you have those discussions about drinking responsibly, right? Like, an ounce of alcohol is a drink. 6 ounces of wine is a drink. 12 ounces of beer is a drink. Just because you poured a glass like this doesn't mean it's one drink. Right. So the discussions you have going off to college, right? Like, that big mug like this of beer is not one beer, so you can have those discussions about drinking responsibly that way. Also, how much you weigh, right? Like are you male or female? Like all of those kinds of discussions. And you have that. And years ago, there's a man, John Hamilton, who said, when's the last time you hosted a sober party with your friends to show your kids? That, that's like a thought-provoking thing, I personally, I have hockey players, and I always wanted to have the hockey banquet alcohol-free, and I was never successful at that. But, it's those kinds of things, modeling, discussions, and I even have that discussion with my kids. Like, I would love it to be alcohol-free, right? Like the banquet. So that they hear you.
My older daughter went to school in New York City, and every student event was alcohol free. And it was met with so much, it was met with a lot of upset.
Was upset.
Oh yeah. Oh, the parents were not happy.
Well, the parents. Oh, yes.
Like the hockey banquet.
Yes.
Banquet,
yes. But the university, was it the university or high school?
No, it was high school.
High school. But the school made that effort. That's amazing. But that's unpopular.
Very unpopular, right?
Yeah. But the school is sending that message to the kids, which was pretty cool. I think was pretty cool.
They did it.
It's doable, right?
It's definitely doable, and I think it worked for what it was, and I think it did send a message to the students that this is not important. It's not vital to your volleyball banquet to have.
Yeah. Well, another little story I was going to share, and not to upset anybody. I was listening during COVID to podcasts all on health and nutrition and all that kind of stuff, and this one guy, James Swanwick. He's a recovered alcoholic, but his mission is to make sober living popular and okay. And he said, it's called Intoxicated because it's a toxin. And like that resonated with me because I'm what I put into my body and how I sleep and all that kind of stuff. And that like really resonated with me. And over COVID, I pretty much stopped drinking, which was like the opposite of a lot of people over COVID. But I mean, I'm not anti-drinking. I can go out with friends, they can drink, all that. But it was interesting. And so that was a conversation I had with my kids. Like, that's really my point, is to have those conversations just kind of as they come up like that. I was listening to the podcast, or, I noticed something, I was out and overheard something or what, but that's interesting, right? That is called Intoxicated.
So let's, if we could, switch from alcohol to another substance.
Marijuana?
There's a question on the form here. Have you seen a rise in the use of marijuana in teens, given the discussions of legalization in the state and actual legalization in other states?
Yeah, well, Connecticut's stuck in the middle, right? Between Massachusetts and New York now. And so, we're broke. And so, of course, it's all about the Benjamins. So the answer to that, yeah, definitely. And again, the discussions are all the same, right? It's about brain development. The best data that we have because a lot of people say, oh, it's just weed, all that kind of stuff. And we're making money off alcohol. What's the difference between alcohol and marijuana? The best research, best study that we have is out of Australia. Something interesting about Australia is that they don't move a lot. That apparently, I don't know many Australians, but apparently they pretty much stay where they are in the country. So they have a cohort born in 1970. They've got 90% retention on this cohort in this longitudinal study where they ask them questions about everything, biometric data, cognitive data. They do all these questions and assessments and all this kind of stuff. And what they found is those who report chronic use of marijuana, that means once a week even, because it's once a week every week, it's chronic. Those who report chronic use of marijuana have statistically significant cognitive decline. Wow, right? We have an epidemic. My mother is in the Nathaniel Witherall, 75 years old, end-stage Alzheimer's. That's why I'm in 2 longitudinal studies to prevent it. That's why I listen to nutrition and stuff. We have an epidemic of Alzheimer's, which is going to bankrupt us. We want to add to that with legal marijuana. So even if you think they're equal, marijuana and alcohol and all that kind of stuff, even if you think they're equal, we want to double it. That's my response to that. But unfortunately, like I started the conversation with, it's all about the money. States are having a hard time saying no. So it's really, really important. It's even more important that you have those conversations with your kids. Specifically about, yes, while it's becoming legal, it doesn't mean it's safe and better or even equal. The dementia piece is really scary to me. It's really, really scary to me. In fact, I can share a story here. A woman, 52 years old, admitted to me that she started smoking in high school, marijuana, and was continuing until she realized that she couldn't finish sentences and she quit. Just at 52 years old. And she's like, I can't even believe how much I was missing before. That's an N of 1. So, I mean, it's, but we do have that data out of Australia. So, that's a scary one. The marijuana thing is a scary one to me because, it's in edibles. It's, it's accessible. I would say those conversations have to be even more
prevalent.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Teresa, do you have any other
I
questions?
have no other questions. I have someone who's trying to submit a
Okay.
question. Though, so
Amy,
forward on
you're
your
familiar
form.
with the DARE program?
I'm slightly familiar because doesn't it's for elementary school?
Right.
Yeah, to empower kids to say no.
Right. And that was mandatory for many years. And that was, I think, no longer, is that right, Victoria? It's not happening anymore in our schools. Is that correct?
It's not happening. Yeah, it was a choice. The police departments had grants and started a program for many years as part of Drug-Free America. But yeah, we incorporate it into our social emotional learning programs at the elementary school, as well as health programs, health lessons.
Right. My understanding was that I think it stands for drug and alcohol resistance education. That so it was 5th grade. Was that?
It used to be 5th grade. Yeah.
Right. And I don't think it. I think statistically, I don't think it was effective. And like you said, invite parents to come see how their kids can, get into the best college, and they'll show up, and then, sort of a bait and switch. And maybe it was too heavy-handed, this DARE program. And
I think it was also so dependent upon the instructor.
oh,
A lot of it was dependent, upon the instructor, and it did have mixed reviews, as have all the programs, because, as Amy is saying, so much of it has to come from the parents as well.
right, sure.
And the one and done is very difficult, right? it needs to be sort of like an ongoing, and again, early and often, early and often. And so, I mean, if you wanted to, as a district, to send out the information from SAMHSA, I think it's really, really helpful. But you brought up the DARE thing and elementary school. So we discussed this morning in my meeting. I'd always been saying that we need to have these conversations with parents of younger children. So, parents whose oldest are in elementary school. It's where parents are reading voraciously. I often say, they get older and you're like, oh, good, they can stay on their own. I don't need a babysitter, all that stuff. But when they're younger, when they're parents of younger kids, if they start reading about this information about how to prevent substance use, I think it becomes easier. So an example of something I did when the kids were little is you have the open cookie jar policy. I had an open cookie jar policy. How many cookies do you think you should take? 10 cookies? Maybe not a good choice. Maybe 2 cookies, maybe that's a good choice. And that's how you start talking about making good choices, right? What you put into your body, making good choices. And so, I asked, and this woman had an 8-month-old. I'm like, what if your pediatrician said you should start reading up on substance? She's like, I would think he was a quack. So maybe not 8 months, but the concept of learning how to talk about these things at younger ages, to sort of give your kid the tools to be able to say no, versus the DARE program that was trying to teach the 10, 11-year-olds how to resist, rather than having the parent make it more natural, might be the issue. I don't know how many elementary schools you have there in town. Just 2? Okay. So it's one middle and one high, or it's combined. Okay. Because if you had those 2 elementary school groups go to like the middle school for some presentation, sometimes it's exciting. Oh, I get to go and see what the middle school looks like early, So we're talking about how to do that in Greenwich, how to start targeting parents of younger children. But that doesn't help this group because these are older, but it's the same thing. It's never too late to start having real honest conversations with your kids. In fact, like I said, with the suicide, I had the conversation with my 26, 23, and 20-year-old. That's never too late to have any conversations about things that you want to keep them healthy and protect them and make sure that they grow up and have grandbabies for you.
Exactly.
Amy, the piece that's sticking with me from this conversation is the early and often, how important it is to be explicit with kids around choices and things that as parents we're thinking about, things that we know our kids are going to have to face. That's I think that's a really important message for everyone to hear.
Yeah. In fact, you brought up something there, which is there's an urban myth that if you talk about these things, you're going to plant seeds and they're going to do these things. But what we know is kids who have good information make better choices. So there is a statistic on the SAMHSA website also that says if kids learn about these substances from the street, meaning their peers and things, there's a higher likelihood that they're going to engage in them versus kids who learn the facts from their parents. Like when my kids were younger, crystal meth had just like come on the market and whatever. And so that was a hill I was willing to die on because the data on crystal meth is there's no treatment. And I'd rather have my kid try heroin than crystal meth because at least we have treatment for heroin. Not that I want to try heroin, but so that one I talked a lot about. Like there's this drug called crystal meth. It's like cook it up in houses. Never, ever, 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 never do you do that before they heard it from anyone else. So it's early and often, and to know that kids with good information make better choices.
In that same vein, there is a question here for you, Amy. Did or do you continue to have these conversations with your kids despite them rolling their eyes at you, which is what mine does, it says. While it sounds easy to just talk to your kids, the openness to conversations isn't really there. Did you experience that, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yep, even with the eye rolling, I'm okay with that. I don't have to be my kid's friend. I don't have to be cool in their eyes. It's just fine. But what the best place, I don't know if anyone's ever heard this, is in a car. And if they're sitting in the back, or even if they're sitting next to you, so that you're both facing the same way. The face-to-face is where it gets uncomfortable. So if you're sitting in a car and you're both facing the same way, nobody has to look at anybody. So those are really good opportunities to take. And you can even call a spade a spade. I know you're rolling your eyes at me, but as your parent, and I've had this conversation with the suicide one, for example, because they're older. Yeah, ma. I'm like, yes, but I know the data. The more I talk to you about it, the more protected you are. So just, you sort of call a spade. Like, yeah, I know you don't want to hear it from me, but I know that the more I talk about it, the more protection I'm giving you.
Right. And do you continue that message when someone asked a question, sort of, but when you know it's happening, when your kid has gone to college, or maybe in high school, they've experimented with something.
Yeah.
Now they're in college, and they're calling you in the morning, or you're trying to call them or something, and they're saying how much they partied last night, or what they did, or if they're hungover, or if they're, how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
How do you do it? Do you just continue that same message?
Yep. Again, it doesn't have to be like, oh, my kid thinks I'm stupid because they are partying in college and I'm still telling them the same thing. Because the data shows that even when you continue to talk like that they get it. So yes, you can say, wouldn't be my choice for you, right? Because now they're living independently. A college student is living independently, right? So again, that point with being comfortable with that, you've given them the tools to make better choices. So, I know you're living independently, and I really, really hope you're making good choices. Last night might not sound like there were some good choices there. Stay safe. Those kind of yes, you can acknowledge that it's happening, but you can also acknowledge that you don't think it's the best thing for their brain. I do it. I have one in college.
We are out of questions right now, unless
Okay.
I have something to say, which something that just really resonated with me is that we don't want to be hypocritical. We want to seem genuine, and I think that our kids know when we're not being straightforward and honest and upfront. And the line, what you said, waiting till age 21 guarantees you an almost 0% chance of, any addiction issues. And we're just saying, just please try to hold out. Just wait. Just try as hard as you can to hold out. It acknowledges that there's this desire, to try. Kids engage in risky behavior all the time, adolescents. So, we're on your side. We know this is something that you're eager to experiment with. Just the longer you wait, the better. Feels very just comes, with more, I don't know what I'm trying to say, that a kid will think, oh, she gets it. She gets me. She knows that this is happening, but she also cares about me. So just seems a more honest conversation for me to have with my kids.
Exactly. And also that other honest piece of it is like, it's in your face all the time. I totally get it. Right. Like, I mean, if that's true, right. That it's around at the alcohol industry people wear those Tommy Bahama t-shirts with all the, alcohol stuff on them. Right. So it's in their face a lot, and to acknowledge that I get that. And that was one of my things with Kathy Lee and Hoda. I wanted to write in and say, like, do you really have to do your tally with the red wine and the white wine? I don't know if anyone ever watched that, right? Like, do you have to be drinking at 10 o'clock with these moms and their kids at home? But I never got around to writing that. It's everywhere. And having those honest discussions that, you might want to be engaging in that also. But then again, the high school kids, we talk about the sad kids, talk about you don't have a hangover, you remember things, you don't say stupid things, all the things that are important for a teenager who wants to be told the next day, you can't believe what you were doing. I would think, right?
Here's another question. Does the scared straight tactic work, in your opinion? There have been 2 drinking and driving deaths in local communities over the past 2 weeks. How do you incorporate that into the conversation?
Well, I mean, that's sad about the drinking and driving for sure, because I thought at least teens were getting that message that they have a designated driver. So, I mean, that's still one that you have to work on, that you never, ever, ever, and with Uber and everything, I'm sad to hear that. That never, ever would you get in a car with anybody like that. But the scared straight, I'm not as familiar with that program because I'm more about getting kids tools to make their own choices versus the scared straight, I guess, is it, just throwing tons of facts at them that everybody dies and nobody.
I'm not too familiar, but
Yeah. I mean, I personally wouldn't want to be like, everybody dies and that's why you should never do these things. It needs to be internal. It needs to sort of, come from them. Give them facts for sure. Give them facts and, and all the brain research. I mean, like I did not grow up with a seatbelt in my car. Would I ever put my kid in a car without a seatbelt? Never. Right. We know there's new information out there, right? It's the same thing with the drinking age, right? We didn't know what it did to developing brains. Now we know more.
Right. This was very, very interesting.
Yeah. And also, do you have another question there?
No, I don't have another.
Oh, no, I was going to say about the pills and, I mean, so on my discussion this morning, so of course we're talking about Snapchat, but also that the internet is seen as a safe place to buy your drugs, right? And so that's a conversation that no place is safe. No place is safe. They're laced with all this. The drug dealers want your money, right? So one of the things I work with a lot of police, and they say what the drug dealers will do is they'll try to lace it with the right amount of like fentanyl or something that gives you the best high. And they'll take a risk on some people dying so that the word gets out that they have the best drugs and you're going to buy their drugs from that guy. I mean, it's a business. It's a business like any business. And you have those conversations. Like you can't trust anything out there, like pills and even marijuana. I mean, I've asked the Greenwich police, have you ever confiscated marijuana that has only marijuana in it? Nope. And you have those conversations, right? You say like, oh, I was talking to the police or I heard, or, but it's a scary landscape out there for them. And you can't possibly be everywhere for them. You can't possibly know every, have you ever heard of that in plain sight presentation that that schools often do? Has anyone ever heard of that? It's in some of the administrators probably have seen, the pod that looks like a flash drive, or the coffee mug that unscrews on the bottom, those kinds of things, right? Like where kids are hiding their stuff. And, I mean, you can never stay on top of all that stuff. You have to be able to empower your kids enough that they make good choices. And if they make a bad choice, this is the other piece. I had this conversation with my kids too, is if they ever make a bad choice, they have to be able to call you. Right? They have to be able to come to you. And this is the exact thing I said to my kids is, if you came to me and you said, oh my God, I made a bad decision. Do you think that screaming comes from that? No, that's like, thank you for calling me, and have that pre-conversation, right? That you should be always able to come to me. You're going to make bad choices. I make bad choices. Not everybody makes good choices, but you need to be able to reach out when you need help. And again, to the question about, if you think someone has a problem, like that's the other thing, that you need to be able to reach out and get help. You can't just hope it goes away or try to be a good friend, because a better friend, I think, would be getting your friend help.
Right. I think easier said than done. Easier said than done sometimes. It's a
Of
work in
course.
progress. Amy, I so appreciate it. I'm sure I share the comments, the thoughts of everyone on this screen. I so appreciate you talking with us and keeping this dialogue open and opening our minds to such interesting information.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. And I said I put my information on the resource sheet. If anybody has questions, if they want to follow up, I'm happy to answer them and help, empower you more.
Such an important message, Amy. Thank you so much for taking all the time.
Oh,
Really
you're welcome. Thank you.